Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you all for inviting me to EduLearn. This has been a bit of a journey. My flight got canceled, so went halfway across the world and finally got here. So I feel a little tired and haven't had much sleep. And I hope I don't end up looking like that at the end of the presentation. But I am really, really excited to be here with all of you. To be honest, a little bit about myself, and thank you for that kind introduction. I always ask people to introduce me to set the bar low because, but you didn't do that, so I'm not very happy about that. So this is me. I'm, as Punya said, Director of Innovative Learning Futures, which is the most vague title I could come up with for what I do. That is my website. Almost everything that I do, I share publicly with the world, so that is really a good resource. And I do reply to every email I get, and I do mean that. So please, if you have a question or want to follow up, do get in touch. In terms of my background, I have an undergraduate degree in engineering. I'll tell you a little bit more about that. Went on to design school, wanting to be a filmmaker, but ended up becoming an educational professor, researcher. And Laura, you will appreciate this, that I myself identify as an educational systems designer rather than a researcher or professor. So the design piece really resonates. And of course, I'm a parent. I've been a school board member. So what that has allowed me to do is look at education broadly from a variety of different perspectives. And I do want to put a special thanks to Laura here, because with Ron Bagetto, she mentioned this book that they wrote, My Favorite Failure, and they always look out for the people who have really failed miserably, so they reached out to me to write a chapter in that book. And I want to share a little bit of that chapter because I was thinking, how should I frame this conversation around AI and creativity? So I thought what a great way to start is through the story of failure. So I was born and brought up in India, so that's where I was born, that little location. When I was in high school, I was interested in pretty much everything. I loved to read science, math, art, literature, history, poetry, you name it. I would read the back of a toothpaste if I didn't have anything to read. But in India, if you're good in science and math, you have to become an engineer or a doctor. So I ended up going to engineering school, and this is how I describe my experience there. So I call this the Fourier transformation, which is, I went when I was 18 years old, and this is the failure that I wrote about in the book that Ron and Laura edited. And what this failure did, though, in hindsight, is, it made me a better educator, because what it told me, that student in the back of the room who's sort of not paying attention, that maybe, or they're not succeeding, that the fault may not be that student's, that the fault might be of the system or of the teacher or mine. Right? I think that's really important to have this deep empathy for learners. But at the end of 4 years of engineering, I was like, this is not what I want to do. I'm interested in too many different things. I was interested in film and art and so on. So I said, okay, I want to make educational film. So I ended up in this place called the Industrial Design Center to get my master's in visual communication. And that's where I met this guy. And literally this old version with the floppy disks and so on, if you remember. And before that, when we were engineering, I'd actually done programming using punch cards. I don't know how many of you people remember that thing. But on this machine was this software called HyperCard. And the person who actually developed HyperCard, Bill Atkinson, passed away just on the 5th of June this year. This is a tribute that I wrote to him, because this is a person I'd never met. But this is a person who completely changed my life. I realized that all my interests in art and design and creativity and science and math and representing ideas could come together in this machine, whatever this was going to be, and that ended up becoming my future. So that's the story that I wrote in the chapter. One of the things that Bill Atkinson talks about, and I think that is very resonant to me, is that when we talk about technology and learning, there's a really complex interplay between technology, culture, society, individual, psychology, all of those things. It's not very simple, not very straightforward. Very recently, I was in Turkey, and I had a chance to visit the Anatolia Museum. And I was looking at these artifacts from, the beginning of human culture and civilization, and looking at these hieroglyphics and this passing on not just of information and knowledge, but wisdom and culture through art and craft, thinking of this technology and tools and how far we have come in terms of how much information we can hold in the palm of our hands, right? I mean, that's the world's first Palm Pilot, right? Handheld device there, and then now the phones that we have, and now we are talking about this thing called AI. So I'm going to focus a little bit of time, almost not a little bit of time, 25 minutes and 5 seconds on generative AI and what it means to teach and learn in this age of generative AI. Now, AI, came, suddenly ChatGPT popped into our lives in November of 2022, and everybody went sort of crazy, this thing, what is this thing? But the fact is that AI has been with us for a long time. If you have used Google Maps, if you've used Spotify, Netflix, every technology today has AI in it in some shape or form. Various kinds of expert systems, so on, have been around for 50 years or more. But there was something different in that moment, I think, firstly because, and I'll talk a little bit more about what makes this technology so unique and why it sort of resonated with us. And before we knew it, we had all these other and more. I mean, I could sit down another 10 minutes and I could put 10 more logos on there. Of course, when this new technology came out, the first thing we heard, this is the end of education as we know it. That students will cheat and plagiarize. So here is a headline, which is ex-cabinet minister calls for handwritten exams to reduce risk of AI cheating, because the thing is that if you give a student an assignment to do, they would just give it to ChatGPT or whatever, and they would get a response back. So here's an example I found the other day, which I thought was really funny. So this was a student asked to write a short paragraph about your daily routines. And this was, you're supposed to handwrite this. So they hand wrote, and they said, I don't have personal daily routines like humans do, but I engage in a variety of... So just having them write by hand may not be the solution. At the same time, as in everything, people sort of say, oh, no, we shouldn't think about this technology as being an enemy. We should start thinking about integrating it, the whole thing of human-machine partnerships and, and so on and so forth. And of course, we did this one study with school leaders from across pretty much across the country, actually. And one of the dominant themes that kept coming up was, can we just slow this down? Because this thing is moving too fast for us to even respond to what it means and how we can deal with it. And anytime some new technology comes along, there's a whole bunch of people who will give you literacy frameworks. So you can just Google AI literacy frameworks, and you will get 50 more. I just, didn't have enough time to put all the things that I could find. And I started wondering about this question, does every new media or technology need a new literacy? Like every time a new thing comes out, oh, we need digital literacy, we need social media literacy, we need this literacy. So I said, what happened if the pencil was a new technology? So I have on my website a whole poster that you can print out and put in your office about pencil literacy, because the pencil is a very scary technology because it can destroy society, You can erase things that other people wrote. Truths became erasable. You can impersonate. There is information overload. Suddenly, you don't have to chip a stone tablet. You could write as much as you want. What are you going to do? So on and so forth, right? Also have a post which is, what happens if books get mass-produced? And horrible things will happen. Listen, you will not trust other people. Right? You will say, look it up. But guess what? If we start saying, like, how many times people look you up, that's a citation. So when you think about citations, that's actually a legacy of print. And that becomes more important than what you actually wrote, if you can get enough citations, right? I know that because my career is built on people citing me, and I love that, right? Irrespective of what I said, So the question for me became not about the technology per se, that we have to truly understand what is this thing called generative AI, right? Because print is not the same as TV, is not social media, is not generative AI. We tend to think of these technologies as being relatively neutral. And I think that they have propensities that push us one way or the other that we need to be sensitive to. Now, this doesn't play out in a neutral context as well, so we'll talk a little bit about that. But I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this, distinguishing this myth versus reality of generative AI. So what is generative AI? Well, if you go and ask Midjourney what generative AI looks like, this is what generative AI looks like according to AI. It looks like a woman with strange things on their head. I have no idea why, but that's what Midjourney says. But actually, generative AI looks like this, which is just banks and banks of servers which are doing all kinds of computation. What it is not a search engine. It is not a truth machine. It is not one that if you ask a question, it looks it up and gives you the answer. So what is it? So the way I try to talk about this is that, we live in this world, this real world of the trees and tables and chairs and stages and screens and so on. We take this through our senses, a part of it, not all of it, because our senses don't cover it all, and we create some internal mental representations of that. Now we are humans, so we create external representations of these. So they could be TikTok videos, scientific theories, books, presentations, what have you. And a bunch of those, now the nice thing about the representations in our head, that they're always being tested against the real world. If I think that if I drop this, it's going to fly away, guess what? If I drop it, it's going to hit the ground. The world is going to tell me, dude, gravity works this way. So that's a really important thing about our mental representations, that they're being tested by other people, by the real world. Now, of these external representations, some have been digitized, not all of it. Depending on where in the world you are, different amounts have been digitized, and those digitizations are used to train these large language models. So the large language models just go through and look for patterns in those little segments of stuff that's been digitized. Now, the big thing to remember is that there is a big separation between these models and the real world. They have been trained on digitized representation of a massive representation of what little bit we got of the world through our senses. Does that make sense? So that's a really important thing to understand. And how it works is effectively is this: you type in the sky is, you throw it at an LLM, LLM starts doing probability thing and says that most probably the answer is blue, and says the sky is blue. And we think, wow, LLM knows that the sky is blue. The problem is the me does not matter. So I could say something like, cubicle stars drink, throw it at the LLM, it will do some probability calculations and say, cubicle stars drink light. And we will say, not only does it know, it is also a poet. Because this sounds really poetic. The problem is, when people say that LLMs hallucinate sometimes, fact of the matter is, all they are doing all the time is hallucinate. When you ask it a question, it makes up the answer as it goes along based on probabilities of what it has been trained on. Sometimes they align with what we think, so we say we got it right. Sometimes it doesn't, and we say it hallucinated. The fact of the matter is, these large language models, I'm not speaking of all AI, I'm speaking specifically of large language models, are making stuff up as they go along. So that's really important to understand. They are controlled a little bit by training, by people coming in and saying, that's a bad response, okay, that's a good response, that's a bad response, and so on. So that's called the reinforcement learning from human feedback. But that helps you understand a couple of things. You could ask the same question to the large language model, and you will get different answers. That's because there is a variant that is inbuilt into the system because it is building up the answer from bottom up. Every time you ask a question, it's making it up from scratch, so it will always be slightly different. That has implications for how we use it in education. So there was this book by Harry Frankfurt, the philosopher, called On Bullshit, where he talks about this idea that there is truth and there are lies, and then there is bullshit. Those are people who don't care about either truth or lie, they just spout words. And I think that's a perfect analogy for large language models. Because they don't care about the truth and falsity of what they're saying, they are just existing in a world of words or images or pixels. I think that's really important to understand. So my friend Leon first said this: chatbots don't make sense, they make words. I think that's a really important insight. But it is also an amazing technology. So I'm going to give you some examples from my life. So this is early on when ChatGPT came out. I said, write me a proof of the infinity of primes, that Euclid's proof of the infinity of primes, but put an error in the proof for the student to find. And literally within minutes, it had given me this poem. We can argue about the quality of the poetry, but what I cannot argue about is the fact that it had created this poem. Now think about what the LLM needed to know, and I'm putting "know" in quotation marks. It needed to understand what poetry was. It needed to understand, again, understand in quotes, Euclid's proof. It needed to understand the kinds of mistakes humans make to insert that into that and then put it all together. If a human had done that, I would have no doubt that this person was creative. And the fact that it can do it over and over again in different languages, that it can do it in different styles. You can say, make it in iambic pentameter, make it a sonnet, whatever. Make it a rock song, sure. And this is early on. I mean, you can see all of these things are archived on my website. You can go take a look at it. Entire transcripts, I keep them. Here's another one. Can anybody tell what this is a picture of? It's not very clear here, but any guesses? Okay, so this is a picture below a tree during a total solar eclipse. I took this picture when I was a graduate student in Urbana-Champaign. There was a total solar eclipse. And you see these little circles. Those are the gaps between the leaves acting like tiny pinhole cameras, so you get all these little eclipses on the ground. Next time you have an eclipse, look down, not up. It's kind of fun. So I gave this image to ChatGPT, and I did this again when the new reasoning models came out more recently, and I said, what is this? 2.5, 3 years ago, the first answer it gave was wrong, and I said, look at the shape, and it said, oh, this is a solar eclipse. Okay? In this one, the moment I gave the image, it said it's a picture taken during a solar eclipse. And then I said, in the latest one, this is what's crazy, I said this was taken in the 90s, where was this picture taken? And they said there were 4 total solar eclipses in the world. But beyond that, I'm not sure where this was taken. I said, I was a PhD student. My name is Punya Mishra, and I was a PhD student. No, actually, all I said was, my name is Punya Mishra, and I took this picture. Does that help? And it said, looking up your bio, you were a grad student in Urbana-Champaign. There was a total eclipse that went over the Midwest. So the chances are you took this photograph on such and such a May 11, 1994, between 10 and 11 and 1 p.m. Crazy, right? So then this is a classic optical illusion. You might feel that that red circle is bigger than that one, but they're actually the same size. So I ask LLM, which red circle is bigger? It says both are the same size. This is the classic Ebbinghaus illusion. So I was like, man, LLMs are smart. They are very smart. Then I gave it this. And I said, which red circle is bigger? And it said, both circles are the same size. I'm like, what? Then I gave it these illusions, or they were non-illusions. One line is actually bigger than the other. And it said, all red lines are the same size. So you have to understand, what it's doing is seeing patterns. So it sees the red circle follow around, but oh, must be the Ebbinghaus illusion. It's not looking at the circles, right? So try this one. Create a photorealistic image of clock faces all showing 6:30, and it'll give you a bunch of clocks which all show 10:10. All right? So these are things like this happen, where coding assistant refuses to write code. These strange things happen. Right? And this is a recent article from the Wall Street Journal just 2 days ago, talking about how easy it is, because despite the reinforcement learning that humans have done, it's very easy to break that little monster that's sitting inside and start doing weird things. So this is something I figured out, that LLMs are smart, but they're also drunk. So ask it to create a periodic table of elements. For teaching inorganic chemistry, it's different from the one that you create for organic chemistry, and it's super confident that it's made of all this garbage. None of these elements exist. It looks like it's a periodic table. This is the scary one. It's the diagram of the ear, nose, throat system. And it says this should be useful for educational purposes. This is absolute garbage. And so when I was stuck in the flight, when I was in the airport, I said, let me try this. Maybe the reasoning models have become better. So what about this new reasoning models? I did this. This is literally yesterday. Okay, this is a map of the Milky Way showing the planets and the solar system. Venus is out there in the corner. Venus is there twice. Okay, the nasal cavity is in the ear. So, LLMs are smart, they're drunk, and they're supremely confident, right? They're always like, yeah, this is what you should do. Now let's talk about bias. This is Melissa Wars, a former student of mine, now a professor at New Mexico State. If you're interested in this topic, do look up her work. She is doing amazing stuff, just research on this. So here is a picture that I gave for kids in India, and I said, describe this picture. So it described it, then I said, replicate it, and this is what it came up with. Right? I don't have to say more. I gave it a photo of me, and I said, describe it and replicate it, and suddenly my race changed. I also became more good-looking. This is research that Melissa and I have done, but we gave a student essay, and we explicitly said, this comes from a kid from a black family, this comes from a kid from a white family, evaluate and give a score. Now, here's what's interesting. It actually gave the black student a higher score. Guess why? Because in the reinforcement learning, they were like, if anybody explicitly asks about race, be scared, be very scared, be very careful, match it out, don't be racist. And then we said, it attends an inner city school, attends an elite private school, boom, racism was back. Okay? Even more scary is when we gave it a paragraph, we gave it no information about the student. The only thing is in this paragraph, there was one word that was changed. In the one case, the student said, I listen to rap music. In the other case, they said, I listen to classical music. And that was enough to change not just the score that the essay was given, but also the feedback that the student received. We looked at Gen AI feedback on student creativity. Again, one change of word can make a difference in the kind of feedback that the student gets. And so then when I hear news like that, this came out of England, that teachers can use AI to save time on marking, it concerns me. It concerns me because we would not even know that the information that we are getting, because we are not sitting and doing these controlled experiments that Melissa and I are doing. How would we even know that these biased responses are coming? But the key takeaway, if there's one thing I need you to take away from today, is this message, which is chatbots are smart, drunk, biased, extremely confident interns. All right, so that's what you have with you right now all the time. We now have 24/7 a really smart, but occasionally drunk, biased, supremely confident intern. As long as you keep that in mind, I think it can be fun. And so use AI, we say, when accuracy doesn't matter, because it gets facts wrong, but it gets moods right. So the fundamental challenge that we face in education with the use of AI is I talk about knowledge of AI on the right the vertical axis and knowledge of the domain. If you're a learner, you have a double trouble. You don't understand AI and how it works, and you don't have the judgment to be able to judge the output of AI. Right? Because it'll give you some garbage and you think it's fine. Or it'll give you enough correct but enough incorrect that it'll take you down the wrong path. You just don't have the judgment for that. On the other side, the expert. So you're a really good teacher who keeps up with AI. One thing that we are finding more and more is that there is a cognitive overload. Your output actually becomes better because you have this smart, drunk, blah, blah, blah intern sitting with you, but that intern is also drunk, which means you have to double, triple check their work, and that's a little bit more cognitive overload. So those are sort of the challenges that we think when we look at education. So a lot of the rhetoric around Gen AI in education has been this focus on efficiency. Lesson planning, accessibility and differentiation, assessment and feedback. And I think that we need to be very careful for some of the reasons around bias and hallucinations and so on that I've talked about before. But I do think we can do better, and that's where I think it comes in as a creative partner. And because LLMs are really good with style, not with substance. Like it can write a poem in a certain style. It can create an image in a certain style. The accuracy of it is going to be off. Now that can be, if you have, as a creative partner, can be really powerful. So these are some examples of my personal explorations of things that my students have done. So this was one where I asked it to write a song about entropy and its sort of unfair beauty, because entropy means the world's going to end, but it also is a really powerful idea. You can go to my website, you can listen to the song. Again, I have no musical talent. The fact that I could create something like this, based on an idea that I had and some, back and forth. I'm a huge fan of this 19th century Indian poet called Ghalib. I've always felt his poems are very, I don't even know how to describe it. Anyway, I've always felt that if you'd have lived today, he would have either been a heavy metal singer or a rap singer. So I took one of his old ghazals, which I love, and I made a heavy metal version of it, which I really, really love. Again, Ghalib as a heavy metal singer, who would have thought that? I love doing typographical designs like this, and over the past year, you can go to my website, I have like literally 50 more examples of where I'll create a typographical design, which is like anti-social media, and I will have a conversation with Claude, and I'll say, Claude, what's your response to this? Give me something, and we go back and forth, and we argue. And so this is what Claude came up with. My social anxiety has an Instagram account. I think that's awesome. Here's another one. I said periodic table, and then table manners, sort of this wordplay. And it said, chemistry is complex, but etiquette is elemental. Both required measured responses to avoid explosive results. That is so good. And here's my absolute favorite. It's the word ohm, which becomes atomic bomb. And Claude's response, the moment between silence and thunder, don't hold your breath. That's gorgeous, right? And I get genuine enjoyment in this partnership with AI. And here are some examples of what people call vibe coding that I've been doing recently. These are just simulations of bacteria and antibiotics, interactive gas laws, one around Indian music. I'll show you some examples. Here are some interesting ones, which are simulations that actually break the laws of physics, because students have misconceptions about physics. So I actually made simulations which enhance the misconception so that now they can go and actually do experiments in the world. Again, something that AI lets me do. This is a unit circle demo which connects the Pythagorean theorem to sine and cos waves, to sound and color, and you can watch actually a little animation of it. You can see the Pythagorean, you can see how it's happening with the sine and cos. Because it's a unit circle, you can also understand what sine squared theta plus cos squared theta is 1. A whole bunch of things brought together. I don't know how to program in Python. I don't know how to program in JavaScript. It's one afternoon. But it required knowledge and understanding of the domain and to be able to continuously push it, right? This is one that I created just a couple of days ago for this presentation here. This is flocking birds. So these are a bunch of birds at random. There are very simple rules about how they interact with each other, and you will see flocking behavior start emerging. And you can adjust all these parameters literally 20 minutes to create this, something I could have never done before. So, initially I talked about this thing about the Fourier transformation. So 2 days ago, before this talk, I was coming here, I was like, come to think of it, I've forgotten what the Fourier transformation is really. It's a nice joke to make that joke. So I started working with Claude, and I said, what is the Fourier transformation? So it told me all these things about frequencies and audio and how it's used in noise-canceling headphones. Then it said, there's this interesting visual thing you can do with it. I said, can we make a simulation for it? So according to the Fourier transformation, any image that we create, let's say a line drawing, can be created by a bunch of circles moving around. And I said, this is really interesting. How can we do this? So here's a screenshot of the simulation. This is on my website. You can go and play with it. So let's say we start with a triangle. Then I analyze it. Then I say start. And right now you see it just uses one circle. So that's a very boring looking triangle, which is essentially a circle. Now watch when I click and I say 2 circles. Now if you can see there, it's taking 2 circles. I don't know, it's very faint. But can you see that? And I think I have a zoom in at some point. So as you add circles, you get more and more fine detail, and you can start replicating that image. Go play with the simulation. It blew my mind, and I was not even expecting what this was going to be. So you can zoom in. Do you see that now? Like, I learned something new. I created something that I can share with the world. So this idea that I think, starting to think of teachers, this is something that I've argued for a long time, that teachers are designers, that they are the people who can take this technology, convert it to make it something useful for learners. And so we were talking a little bit about what we call an AI integrated design for education, keeping in mind all these things that we have talked about. Those of you who know of my work know of this thing called the TPACK framework, but I won't get into that here. But this idea that technology, pedagogy, and content need to come together, and that teachers are designers in that space, right? So this idea of keeping teachers in control, embracing the process, and addressing sort of the ethical issues that are involved there. And so active engagement, continual reflection, collaborative exploration, and creative discovery, I think, is the way that we would argue to work with AI. I want to briefly talk about taking the long view, because just as I'm excited about this technology, there's a part of me which is very concerned about it as well, and I want to make sure to address that, because I think as educators, we're going to face confront the challenges coming out of that. And this is this idea that these tools are neutral, that we need to add it to our toolkit, that if you don't add it, you will get left behind. But the things that tools are us, that media are objects that we think with, and they change how we think and interact with the world. And if oral cultures, for instance, prioritize memory and print cultures emphasize systematic organization, what types of knowledge will AI systems foster? I think that's important to understand. And this is the first technology in the entire history of the human race where we can interact using natural language. It uses emotional language, particularly deliberately, in order that we anthropomorphize it. What does that mean? To have the psychological other in this space, and they are being increasingly designed to what we call supernormal stimuli. I've written quite a bit about it, to be irresistible by design. So what does it mean to live in a world where we have artificial intimacy? What does it mean where these kinds of headlines are all over the place? And this is just the beginning. And we know what has happened with social media. This is a recent study showing that between 2024, where generating ideas was number one, in 2025, it's become the idea of therapy and companionship is the number one reason people are using these devices. So even as in education, I can talk about how I can use it in the classroom, what is the broader social context within which it functions. And we live in a world which has already been deeply disturbed by social media. Again, I'm not saying technology is all bad. The fact that I can communicate with my friends all over the world, collaborate, work together, that's a really powerful thing. But it has also changed the political, social, economic substrate of the world that we live in. And what does it mean to live in these worlds where fake news, this is a crazy statistic. 15% of high schoolers report hearing about AI-generated deepfakes from someone in their school, because it's incredibly easy to do that. And so there is this absurd one-sidedness of the AI debate. Whenever I talk to educators, I hear them talk about the ethics. But who gave permission to these 5 or 6 companies to throw this technology, which honestly is not ready for prime time, and we are dealing with it, to the world is something that really, really bothers me. And I think it's really important that AI doesn't care about the truth. It doesn't care, period. We do. Right? And there was this mantra from Facebook, like move fast and break things. Like, I hope we don't do that we move intentionally and nurture things, because that's what we as educators have always done. Remember, smart, drunk, biased, supremely confident intern. Keep that in mind, and hopefully we leave it better than we found it. Thank you very much.